This week's Voice Party is brought to you by IOPvideo.com. We're all stuck inside and content is king right now. So if you want to create some content, have some video shot, advertise your small business, start a podcast, whatever, check out IOPvideo.com. We do it all and we will do it all for you. IOPvideo.com. We make things look pretty.
Oh, and here we go, the man of the hour, the man with the power. How's it going, me, Dave?
Hello, how you doing?
Welcome to the Voice.
What's going on, buddy?
Dave.
Much. This is weird now. I've been so used to Zoom shit. Now I'm talking to my computer and not seeing anybody.
Hello?
Yeah, it's getting worse, bro.
Yeah.
No, this is the way we've been doing our episodes, and we were thinking about doing Zoom, but I don't know why. Phil,
This sounds better. It sounds
better.
It's a little easier to do it this way. It's less intensive on the bandwidth, and we use this app to edit and distribute our podcast anyway, so it's just convenient.
Yeah, if you're not using the video, why bother? Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
What's up, Dave? What's up, man? Long time no see, brother.
Well, we're still not seeing. We're hearing. But yeah, I hear you. So
I agree.
Long time no see.
Last time you did an interview, I was like so bored. I just logged on and watched you and Jorge go at it.
Where was it? When was that? What do you mean? What interview? I don't remember.
Jorge interviewed you on his show.
Oh.
And where he's interviewing people.
Yeah.
And I just went on there and I was asking you guys questions back and forth.
Oh no shit! I don't even remember that.
That was like a few months ago, dude.
Oh, was it? Wasn't it a show? That was just a hangout, wasn't it?
It was just something. It was like live stream. You guys went live on Instagram.
Oh, that was on Instagram. Yeah, on his Instagram thing. I when you say show, I always everybody does things on Instagram.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny.
Have you been doing Zoom shows?
Yeah, no, that's what's been keeping me afloat through the months. What happened was the week that the quarantine started, all my gigs were drying up because everybody was ending them, and so I was like, okay, well, I'll just live off my savings or whatever, and then somebody invited me to do one Zoom show with a couple other comics for like an affluent crowd. They're well-off people that are like regular audience members of this one comedian's show she produces, and I ended up making enough money to be like all the gigs that dried up. That money filled up to pay my rent, and then the wheels started turning, and I'm like, if I put together a show of my own based on our podcast, another terrible podcast by comics. We could get an audience and even maybe a few tips. So that was just the start of that. But then I started see other people started popping up doing shows, and the more that people saw that this was going to last a while, I just was glad I started adapting right away, because there's shows and people donate tips, and they're not ideal, but they're not that bad.
Yeah, I did. Oh, go ahead. Well, wait, before we get into anything else, I just want to say real quick. I know we kind of just got into it, but me and Dave, I just want to tell the people what you do, the listeners. Just so if someone's listening and they know what you do, introduce yourself for the listeners.
A stand-up comedian. Been a Bay Area stand-up comedian for the last 10 years. Been, as I say, a professional aspiring comedian for the last 3. So my full-time job. I've been mostly local, but I travel here and there. I'm not some club headliner. I'm a club host and feature at best. That's not knocking what I do. It's just that's the level I'm at. But
you're a working comic.
Yeah, working, and I for the most part, and I also have a YouTube show that I've done off and on the last few years, but I picked it back up in the quarantine called In the Meantime with me and Dave, and you can find those episodes on YouTube pretty easily. So
that's clever. In the meantime, I like that.
Yeah. Little play on words. So,
so you're talking about having to do all these Zoom shows because this damn quarantine is just sucked up all the freelance jobs and all the side gigs and all the hustles.
Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, it's made people. I mean, it's put some people in a tough spot because, yeah, I mean, if you're working in the service industry and stuff like that, that's really rough. And then there's other jobs that are deemed essential. You still got to deal with whatever the potential fears of the coronavirus out there. If you're working at a grocery store or whatever else, so yeah.
What do you think like stand-up comedy shows in the Bay Area will be picking up? Like how soon? All right, a better question, because I know they're going to be opening places up soon. How soon do you think you'll feel comfortable doing stand-up in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something right now. I have no fear of this bullshit.
Okay.
I don't. I know it's very real. I am not the model person for. I mean, I wear a mask to protect others. I wash my hands and do all that kind of shit. But I'm not. I'm definitely one of these people that I care more about more about the potential of hurting others than myself. However, it's like when you travel BART as much and at the times that I've been on it, like what are you really afraid of? But I get why people are afraid of it, and I know some people that have gotten it that have been only 2 that were hospitalized. I don't know them like that well, but 2 people that were hospitalized that they could have died from it. I know another person who I am in closer contact with who got it that got sick, and actually I know 2 people who got pretty sick from it, but no one that's died. I've actually more people that I know. There's more people that I know that have died from like quarantine related like ODs and relapsed and then had something happen as a result of the relapse and die. Or one person, I don't know this person, but I came across them. They committed suicide, and there's been a lot more, and I don't negate the importance of what we're doing, but it's definitely been at a cost that I think country's been kind of in denial over. And then we shifted gears, and now we're on to the trouble. I want to say the tense subject of race. For good reason. I think it's long overdue. It's just a hell of a time for it to come up. And
yeah, right. Oh my God, this fucking year.
Yeah, it's been it's been a roller coaster. That's for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say, funnily enough, I do like man on the street videos with the stand-up comic Iman Dismore, and 2 weeks before the quarantine started, we did a video in San Francisco where he's just talking to people about the coronavirus, and everybody he's interviewing is just like, it's a hoax. It's fake. It's not real. And boy, did that not.
All those people are infected now. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I know that because it's definitely a real illness. I'm not an expert, and I don't pretend to be. I just also I'm always skeptical of like. It's weird. I'm skeptical of 2 things. I'm skeptical of people who know everything that clearly are not experts. And I'm skeptical of the overwhelming sense of conformity listening to a small handful or listening to, I mean, it's strange because it's like the main thing that I've learned from all of the best sources of all this shit is that really they don't fucking know how this shit works. We know that it's there, and we know that it's as transmissible as most things that are flu and whatever. But it seems to have like a higher rate in some places than others, and then also with the asymptomatic factors and all that kind of shit, they really don't have a lot of information on it, and yet are pumping us full of it constantly. So
it seems like every week
they're sending it out.
Yeah,
it seems like every week that goes by we get new information that contradicts old information and then contradicts forthcoming information. Nobody fucking knows. They're just saying shit really confidently to hope we believe them.
It's confusing, and then you got people that are arguing over it. I don't know how many unfriendings have been going on since the quarantine.
Jesus.
So many unfollows and unfriends and blocks. So
well, that's that. Well, I think as a comic, you're probably dealing with that. I mean, for a long time already. I mean, with
I have no problem with stirring shit up on Facebook and getting mad on Facebook.
Yes, I know that's one of the things that I know about you is this. I know you don't really give a fuck who you offend, and that's what
I do. That's not true. I do.
You do? Okay. Well, to me,
I do these days.
It just seems like you know. Okay, I know you. I've never gotten into it with you or whatever. And whenever I see someone that like on Facebook, another comic that posts something about you, like I just unfriended Mean Dave because blah blah blah. I immediately think, what did they do? You know, because I know they, like, what the hell did they do? And you the way you were the first time I talked to you, you've been that way ever since. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, I mean, I don't see those. If they happen a lot these days, I haven't seen it, and I don't pay it too much mind because these days a lot of times it's just like I've been down that road with people before so many times that now it just gets kind of tiresome. But so I try to avoid that shit. But like the most recently, the one that almost like happened where it was kind of it wasn't so much my fault, but I acknowledged the fact of how it was perceived. Was a friend of mine, comedian Ben Kalina, who I've known for many years, and he got upset at a tweet right? You know, Twitter, in the Twitter world, where I forget what it even the source was, but he had like a couple misspellings in like a response, and I just asked if he was drinking again before noon.
Oh shit.
And he got really pissed off at me at that implication. I'm like, I'm joking. This is the shelter in place. Like, I've seen pictures of you with joints and beers in your hand, like, you know, in so many different scenarios. So I thought it was just like, you know, I'm just casually joking that, you know, at you know, the day drinking, because I don't know how many people were posting and tweeting that they were day drinking through the beginning of the shelter in place. So I just thought it was the throwaway thing. And then he came at me like hard, angry, and I didn't see it coming, and I basically was just sort of like, I think you're overreacting. You know, I definitely didn't mean it to, you know, hurt your feelings none or whatever. And I said, I just thought I was joking in territory that was totally okay knowing you. And,
see, that's what happens when you call out like a closeted alcoholic in public.
I wouldn't even call him a closeted alcoholic. Like, here's the thing: is his response is definitely defensive on that level. But Ben knows me. We've known each other for a long time.
Very funny dude.
We both started at the same time, and he's a good dude. And that was where the funny thing about it, where I got my second DUI. The last place I was at a bar in Livermore that he introduced me to. So it's kind of funny. But he's a functioning dude. He's got his issues, and just like anybody else, but I was not about. What happened was within 24 hours. Because he blocked me on Twitter. I'm like, I barely follow you on Twitter. Why you gotta block me on Twitter? I'm like, it's fucking a wonder I even responded to this. And so I was like, well, here, let me help you solve your problems. And I blocked him on Facebook just to save face in that moment. And then as I'm going on, and I oddly enough, I was talking about it in a just a Zoom hangout chat later. And I was realizing, I'm like, this is Ben Kalina I'm talking about. Like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, he's the last person that I should ever be beefing with. And then also, we were on... It was Butch just posted a flyer not long after that. We were on the same show that Saturday on Zoom.
Oh wow!
So I was like, "Fuck this! I'm not gonna let this fester." So then, by the morning, I unblocked him on there, and I totally I gave him a nice apology of just like, look, I get why you're mad. It was not my implication. I thought I was fucking around in some territory that was okay, but I apologize. You know, we're old friends, and I'm like, and this is you. Like, why am I gonna make a fucking issue with you? This is my 12-step program at work, by the way, because the old me, not a problem cutting that shit off.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that at one of my shows you did, that you had stopped drinking, and then I guess I'm such a fucking drunk. Every time I see you, I'm a little buzzed or whatever, or high. Every time we perform together, I was like, wait, like you, I don't know why I assumed you drink and smoke, and I was like, you don't even eat cheese. Like, holy shit, like.
That's not part of recovery, though. The cheese, saying, like, the cheese shit. I'm allergic to milk, and fuck all of that shit. That's
no, but I had no idea. I guess I'm so sometimes because I used to drink a lot more back then, and it's just you kind of just assume, oh, long hair, yeah, he smokes weed, It's just,
oddly enough, in early recovery, I had more offers of free weed or like it's weird how recovery works sometimes, and this happens for a lot of people. Where when I'm still drinking and still partying or whatever, nobody's offering free shit. But as soon as I'm in recovery, everybody's got free shit to fucking offer. And it's just infuriating. So I even was on the street. I was killing time, smoking a cigar. Around the corner from my job. I just got off work, so I'm chilling there. First thing that was funny was a woman who clearly looked like she was in harder times than me.
Yeah.
She passed by me. I got a bag full of sandwiches too. I'm giving out later at a show, and she passes by me, looks at me, does a double take, and I'm like, "What the fuck is this lady gonna say?" And she goes. She reaches in her pocket, and then she hands me some change. She goes, "Here's sugar. It looks like you need this more than me." And I looked at her and I smiled, and she goes, "Oh, you don't need it, do you?" I'm like, "No, I just got off work. Sorry, I just look like shit. Thanks, though." And so she laughed at that, and then not even like 5 minutes after her, a very well-off looking, clearly professional, I would guess, 6 figures at least or more. This guy making, he's walking with his luggage. And he passes by me, does another double take. I'm like, "What the fuck is with today?" And he looks over and he goes, "Hey, man, I got like an hour and a half before my flight, and I can't take this with me. So you want to help me finish this?" And he has this huge fucking joint that has plenty left. And I look and I said, I know how it appears, but actually I don't smoke weed, man. I'm sorry. Thanks for the offer, though. And I'm like, where were these motherfuckers?
Yeah.
In 2012, 2013. So.
Yeah. It's the same thing with dating. Like when you're single, women won't pay you any mind, and then
every
yes, throwing themselves into traffic just to get your attention.
That is every. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah,
I have an issue with that. Like I was like, I went through. I was in a relationship, and then as it was ending, I was like, here we go. Oh no, sorry, the other way around. When I got into a relationship, that didn't seem to happen to me.
Is this true?
And so I'm like,
no, I'm just kidding.
No, absolutely true. And so I'm like, what happened? Like, yeah, it was like, yeah, I went from 0, 1, 0, and that was it.
and that's been it, huh? No more.
Yeah. So maybe next time.
Maybe in another lifetime. No, I know because you mentioned that at the March show we did. I've been performing with you since like 2013, dude. Like that's when I first did my first shows with you. I didn't when I first
we met. Yeah, we met after I got in recovery. Isn't that correct, JD?
I think so. Yeah, because
I'm pretty sure.
You did one of my first ramen shows, and
I did one of the later ones because I saw that you were doing them.
Oh yeah, with Butch.
Like because you started doing them. I did one later on because I was actually I wasn't pissed at you, but I was pissed at because I knew all the people that lived there.
Yeah,
and I'm like, what are they doing comedy shows there? And I'm not involved. These assholes. So I was I used to do some punk shows there every now and then. That's
what it was. Okay, so that when we met, you were already done. So I think you were done. You were already.
Yeah, I knew. I may have crossed paths with you because I knew. I crossed paths with Johan from time to time.
Okay. But, and I think you knew Gaspar also, right?
I knew Gaspar. I met Gaspar later though through our mutual friend Kathy Kathy McCarty.
Oh yeah, those shows in Concord, right?
At Vinny's, yeah.
Okay, so I got a question for you right now with everything going on. Do you think there's a lot of stand-up comedy will be are just people going to be flocking to the shows after this is over, man?
It's funny. Yeah, I think they will, and here's why. We just started doing a show called Comedy Drive-In here in Newark. My friend Mike Bucci, he started doing comedy about a year ago, and he's a funny dude, but he's been a longtime fan of our local shows and stuff. And then we got him into it. He was one of the guys on Drew Harmon's I Think I'd Be Good at That show where we train a non-comic to do comedy.
Yeah.
And he had a good set. and he really enjoyed it. And so much so that he's the only guy who's done the show that's continued doing stand-up afterwards. And he's not trying to he's not delusional and trying to make it a career or anything. He really gets that this is a fun and a rewarding venture to do even on the local level, which is kind of he gets what I do. It's I'm not out here with some delusional dreams of grandeur. I like the fact that it's something that I can do. It's a kind of an independent hustle that I can still make a living at and not have to be some asshole in entertainment to do it. And so he got that, and so he's been doing it he was closing in on doing a year, and then the coronavirus hits and all the shelter in place. So he started thinking about other avenues to be able to kind of still do a live show, but have it be within the parameters of the shelter in place. And he came up with an idea that other people have done too, like in other areas of the country and even in Santa Cruz, which is a drive-in comedy show where if you have the means, there's basically a setup. He's done this before where he's put on drive-in movies locally here in Newark. And so he just basically took the concept and put it to stand-up comedy where they have a mic set up that can be piped into the radio frequencies in your car, and then have a bunch of cars, basically get reservations to park in a lot. And then he built a stage on top of this one trailer he had, and he has a inflatable movie screen where he can then project the image of the comedian onto. And we have this drive-in stand-up comedy show that we just did the first time last Saturday. And it went great, did really well. The audience loved it. And so we're doing them. He's got them slotted. We're doing them each Saturday in June, and then we're going to reevaluate and see if it's worth doing into July or whatever. But and it's all legal. It's all he's a city councilman here in Newark, so he knew the proper channels. He was talking to me about trying to do it guerrilla style. And I said, dude, you're a city councilman, man. You work for the fucking city. I don't think it's a good idea. And,
it's why make it harder for yourself?
Yeah. And,
I guess the paperwork is that tedious. I was I don't want to file out the paperwork. Can we just do it?
Well, it's not even like you'll get kicked out of office. No one ran against him last time. But it's more the fact that it's just, you just don't want it to fall back on you, with any issue. And he went through the proper channels. He did all this shit, and so he gets full credit for putting on this wonderful show. And so we're doing it for the next we got 3 more Saturdays coming up, which is cool. And it was really cool because even regardless of the cars and the fact that they honk or they flash their lights to show that they're laughing and stuff.
That's what I was gonna ask. Because I did a Zoom show. And it was cool to see their whenever I would say the punchline, I'd see their face smiling in the screen, which that kind of helps, whatever. But with the cars honking, I don't know. How is that?
Well, here's the thing: if you're able to adapt to a Zoom show, all these motherfuckers that are bitching about the Zoom shows, I'm like, motherfuckers, you know how much online content that's unwatchable that you've made for the last 10 years that I've been doing this shit, and now you're about the fact that well, I don't know what to do behind it. It's just fucking use your imagination, tell your jokes in a different way. I don't know, play Mr. Rogers and show him your fucking bedroom. Just do something. There's so many different ways to approach. You don't have to do it like your fucking rehearsed stand-up comedy set. And it's not to say it was just funny to watch people kind of take this stand like it's some, I'll put it this way, the people that behave like I'm never doing a Zoom show, they sound just as dumb as these motherfuckers that are holding on to the Confederate flag. It's why? Just try it. And even if you hate it, it's some of these shows tip pretty well. And and so I'm just lucky though that I had the first window into it. And then if you do them, and if you've done them enough, and you kind of get used to how the laughs translate, either you're gonna see them visually laughing, or if you have a few laughers that leave their mics on or whatever. Once you get used to that, and that's been you kind of okay, I can do this, and then you get back on a stage with a microphone, even if you're looking at a fucking parking lot full of cars. You won't care because you're just going to be right back in that. And not only that, a few people you can hear laughing, from their cars and shit. And we all were nervous at first, and then we all fell into it, and we all had a great set. So it's just that feeling of being on a stage again with a microphone, and you're good.
You know, that's the thing that I admire about it, because right now, I mean, whatever, how long this is going to be, this is something. I mean, I've talked to people who are in their 60s who say that they've never experienced anything like this. So just to be able to do something like that and say, you know, this is like one of those weirdest things, to be able to say that you performed on something like this. Because right now, dude, I feel like there's a lot of Jack Torrances just brewing right now, you know? Like,
what is Jack Torrance? Oh, God, the Shining. Yeah. All fun. No, you want to know one of the guys that is...
Here's Johnny.
Yeah, my friend Eric Summers, he's a comic I roll with to a lot of shows and stuff like that. He's definitely... Oh, God, if there's anybody who's the Shining, he's even got a daughter, too, like a daughter and a wife stuck in the house with. He hates the Zoom feel. Oh, and yeah, when he was on stage, the first half of his set was killing us because it was really more him venting.
Yeah.
And then as he went back into his... You've seen... Actually, Eric's done your show.
Yeah, he's a very, like, sweet guy.
He's the corny white dude. Corny white dad.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, when he goes nuts,
his punchlines are like Mr. Rogers feeling.
Oh God, he's so much funnier when he's fucking angry.
Oh, I bet.
And oh God, it was great. And
take all his hard work away, man.
Oh, dude, it was so worth it. It was, and then it was funny because then when he went back into his familiar material, which he as he calls it, his tried and true material. I'm like, all right, now for the boring part. Like I just always just bust his balls about it. He did, and it was fine. He didn't. It still worked on the crowd. But I was telling him, I said, you're much better when you're kind of putting some emotion into it.
Right. You know, and like people just like the day I did the Zoom show. That's one of the first weeks. I think that was back in March. Mm-hmm. And like people were tuning in. That's the beauty of it right now is people want to watch shit. They want it.
Dude, like I said, I picked up my In the Meantime with Mean Dave on YouTube again. The whole reason I started was because I was posting my old episodes for people who were stuck at home and had nothing to do. And one of my buddies who was an interview subject in it, he was like, "Why don't you make a new one?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, good point."
Yeah.
So yeah, and then I just started. I got iMovie on my laptop, and so I just started making them. And then I got really into the editing aspect of it, and started fucking with the editing tricks and stuff. And so, the episode 21's all right, but I think episode 22 on are actually are funny. Like some of them have some really funny moments and stuff. And I even got into editing enough to where I edited like comedian friend Dan Myers, who runs a show over at Clayton Valley Bowl. He had like a side hustle assignment he was looking for someone to do. He needed somebody who was good with editing to edit this footage that he had of his nephew, his baby nephew, falling and hitting his head on the ground, and wanted it turned into one of those hollaback videos, one of those hollaback fails. Yeah. On YouTube or whatever, and I saw it and I educated myself on it, and I'm like, yeah, I can do this, no problem, and made it for him in like less than an hour and sent it to him, and I made $50, so that was pretty nice.
So through this, you've been like, I was gonna ask you, through this, a lot of people have discovering little, you know, talents that they didn't know they had. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I've been unemployed since January 1st. You know, so when everybody else got unemployed, it's like, okay, cool. Everybody don't have time to do stuff now, you know?
Yeah.
But so like I know like I took like a little class session with a friend on how to write scripts properly, because I'm trying to get into that, and we've been doing this show for almost a year now, right, guys? Yeah, almost a year now, and
I think I just edited episode 45, so.
Yeah, we started around almost a year, and I think doing this because, you know, I've done a couple other things, but doing this has kind of kept my head sane in a way, as far as like, because I missed performing in live shows. You know, I don't get me wrong, I enjoy the Zoom stuff, but I just miss doing. Oh, hold on, you still there, Dave? I think we lost Dave. I think he said his internet went down. I think. Yo, Dave, can you hear us?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Go ahead.
I guess we lost him. I was gonna say, you know, he was talking about YouTube, and he was talking about other other people doing Zoom and not adapting to YouTube well, it kind of reminded. I was going to ask him, and hopefully when it comes back on, I'll be able to ask him this. If he had what he thought of the various late night talk show hosts attempting to adapt their show's format to YouTube.
Yeah.
And
Conan has been doing that, and all of them, really, right?
Right, but apparently, like Conan, Jimmy Kimmel, they haven't been translating as well for whatever reason, to YouTube. But you know who's been killing it? Someone who isn't even a regular late night talk show host. John Krasinski has been murdering it.
What, the actor?
Yeah. He has a show. It's called I think it's something like Some News Tonight or something like that.
Yeah.
And the difference between what he does and what Jimmy Kimmel and Conan are doing from home is that Jimmy Kimmel and Conan are going with monologues that are obviously scripted, but they're shot at home. And that's not what people that watch YouTube are necessarily used to watching. Most of the time, vloggers kind of sort of go more all natural off the cuff, we do on our podcast. And John Straczynski has been noted to be more authentic, more freewheeling. His is actually hugely popular. His and The Daily Show are both sort of embracing that YouTube aesthetic of not everything has to be scripted and pre-written down and sound like we're delivering it in front of a live studio audience. And people are loving them for it. But so much so that NBC actually bought the rights to John Straczynski's show.
No way.
It's after a few weeks of it being broadcast during quarantine.
Yeah.
And then apparently I think it was either CBS or NBC, one of those two. And apparently they're getting someone else to host it, and it's and they're going to make it more scripted. But I'm like, wait.
You're taking everything that worked away from it.
Exactly. It's everything that worked, we're just gonna do it ourselves. But we like the name.
Yeah,
no.
They just want the followers. That's what I think with Conan and those other hosts that are doing their show at home. I think for Conan, he has a lot of inside jokes that he can use still, but a lot of those guys, it's they need that live audience for those scripted claps and cheers for some of that shit to work. I think that's why it sounds corny watching it at home. Dave, you back?
Yeah, I'm back. I think I can't. I'm on. Well, I have it now on my
silence.
Are you there?
Yeah. Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay. Because I'm on my phone too, and my internet keeps going in and out for some fucking reason. But I'm on my phone, so it should work. So.
Yeah. No, we were just talking about the people that have been killing it right now.
This episode is going to be called "Getting Logged Off" with Mean Dave.
We were talking about people that have been killing it during the quarantine, and we're talking about how. One of the things was how, the regular talk show host sounds corny online on their little webcam, and who do you think is doing it right now? I know Andrew Schultz has been doing good with some of the. I don't know if some of the listeners have ever seen that. Who do you think is killing this quarantine, man?
Well, I mean, as far as the stuff that I've been, it's funny because I haven't really been that much into a lot of entertainment lately. So it's not like anything was really missing once I got it. But I've been enjoying. If I don't know if any of you watch. There's a guy on YouTube. He's been around for a while. He used to be a DJ at Hot 97 or whatever. The Star Report. It's this dude Star, and my buddy put me onto him a few years ago. And he's this really funny dude that has he puts on episodes on YouTube. He has call-ins and stuff because he live streams, and then it's recorded and he plays it later. But it's really funny, and he deals with a lot of different topics and all that kind of shit. So he's been really enjoyable to watch during the quarantine. And then I got into a podcast called The Rewatchable.
Okay.
With that's with what's his name, Bill? I forget his last name, but it's a bunch of guys. They watch movies that are rewatchable and they talk about them. So those are the two things I've been mainly getting into during the quarantine.
Have you been watching stand-up? Any of those specials that have been coming out since?
Not anything except Mark Normand, his special on YouTube, which is hilarious, and I'm fucking shocked no one bought it. the fact that like he's every bit as good, if not better, than most of the shit on Netflix and anything else. And I'm like, how this dude doesn't have a deal with it is beyond me. But he, it's gotten like millions of views on YouTube. And then Sam Morril, I know, did the same thing, even though like he has a Comedy Central logo on his, but he did the same thing and put his special on YouTube. I'm not a big fan of him, but it's, you know, he wasn't bad. So
did you see the Louis C.K. special?
no, I don't really. I've never been a Louis C.K. fan except for like I like Pootie Tang, which he hates, and like I know he wrote for a lot of things that I enjoyed writing wise, but I was when he got into stand up, he was never somebody that I like. My friend, there was a guy who used to do comedy, Frankie Castro. I always liked what he said about him because I felt the same way. He said, I've never thought of him as a stand-up comic. I've always thought of him as a director who also does stand-up.
Right.
And then he just blew up in popularity, and I could never figure out because I watch him and I get why people like it, but it's so crude and so like it's funny that what he got in trouble for because everybody's like, you know, I'm just like, yeah, I'm not surprised. Listen to his jokes for fuck's sake.
You know,
I mean, you know, and I mean, his jokes are pretty fucking indicative of like, yeah, he knows he's a horrible person, and that's part of the joke. And if you put him on a pedestal, you're only going to want to tear him down for probably some shitty behavior. It's, you know, it's just one of those things, and you know, it's because like, and I like, you know, I don't want to negate any of the, you know, the severity of what he did, but there's definitely worse. I mean, you know, you got Bill Cosby who definitely did worse. You got so many others who have done, and it's not to say like what he did wasn't bad. It's just like, you know, Chappelle has a lot of good points in his jokes that are not meant to incite as much as just like, how much really is this that bad? You know, it's like if they say that he derailed people's dreams, I agree with them. It's like it's a brittle spirit that really lets somebody jacking off ruin your dream. Like how, you know, it's, I don't know, and it's whatever.
I see what you're saying. That's another guy that got a lot of flack for his you know, I'm gonna be honest, I haven't really watched the latest special.
Oh, of Chappelle's?
Yeah.
Oh, what are you doing? You're talking about Louis, and you haven't seen Sticks and Stones? Fuck.
No,
man.
well, you know, I've seen a little bit of it. I've seen Paper Tiger because the thing is, I heard about it from the, you know, comics talking about how
problematic.
And
that fucking word.
And
well, yeah, that was the Chappelle thing came out. Everybody was like, "Oh my god, it's so outrageous, it's so controversial. Everyone's getting all offended." And then I watch it and I'm like, it's the same stuff he's been doing for 20 years. What are you guys talking about?
Targets on purpose, and it's called Sticks and Stones. And I mean, it's
Chappelle.
That's the point. He basically was like, look, I'm going to do every single subject that you're not supposed to do in this special, and it's still going to be funny. And I mean, he's point blank proving George Carlin's assertion that you can make anything funny, but it requires a talent and work, you know, and not many people really have that. So, yeah.
I never asked you
what it is. I don't get this outrage culture where people are so easily offended. Because I mean, I grew up with like Howard Stern and Jerry Springer and Jackass and Tom Green and Beavis and Butthead and South Park and all this stuff. So when I see people getting offended over every little thing, I'm like, how young are you? What is going on here?
But what I'll also say is, even then, there were movements of concerned parents pushing back against that. I mean, you got to see it, but I grew up in the Bible Belt where all that stuff was frowned upon and considered inappropriate. I mean, maybe it's more out there now because the internet and people are voicing it more publicly than ever. But, dude, before that, like, Dungeons and a nerdy game like Dungeons and Dragons, there's a huge movement to shut that down because it's like, oh no, people are practicing Satanism with it, and so nothing has really changed. There's always been this push and pull for censorship. It's just, you know, those of us that grew up in households where like maybe our parents were cool with us doing whatever, we didn't notice.
The shift came in.
It's out there.
The shift has been from who is
it's
doing
always
the
been out
complaining.
there.
And because at that time, what you just said, that in the more conservative areas, they were the ones that wanted to shut down these seemingly offensive, the Married with Children's, the South Parks. They were the ones that were like this stuff, the language and the content, and even the going to music, the PMRC. Even though that was that was Tipper Gore's a Democrat's wife, but even though that was still more of a conservative mindset that was going after all of those artists, and then now today, what you have is a complete paradigm shift where the outrage is coming from is coming on behalf of it. I hate using the word liberal, but it definitely comes from a place of liberal outrage towards everything from the punching down arguments to it's like we're no longer allowed to make jokes that use a marginalized people as the punchline, and that's what ultimately has been from the transgender aspects to people of color, and the thing of what I hate even saying that, the fact that that's the normal term now, people of color, Jesus Christ. And so my point being though is that what Chappelle essentially did, because his point was stated earlier on, is that he's a black man in America, and that with all of the stuff that kind of came about with was it the Caitlyn Jenner on the front of the news articles and all, seeing this sweeping embrace by the media and trying to be imposed on the culture of what a white man wanted to do, and then that being completely embraced versus being a black man still in America that is still obviously clearly, as we've experienced the last couple weeks, is black man who's black is a target, that we haven't fully addressed those issues before really and he said it reeks of privilege, and I completely agree with that, and so it's not to negate any of what they are saying, but we have kind of turned into this like, what about me kind of culture, and I think that's what it's more indicative of and what's funny is the outrage. You think it's because people are hypersensitive, and that's not true at all, because sensitive people who are truly sensitive are intelligent and are able to interpret the information and understand where jokes, even if they're offended by a joke, they can still understand that this is a joke, and it's not going to hurt me. It's more indicative of just this knee-jerk reaction of like, I hear these words, I hear these subject matters, they must be talking shit. Look at all the backlash to right now currently, as if it's news, Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in Tropic Thunder, which was a complete satirizing of the entire Hollywood culture of blackface. Yeah. And that was the point of it. There's a character in the movie who keeps pointing it out to him, and yet you have people now that are like just discovering it and tweeting about it as if it's something that needs to be brought up. And it's like, no, this was a movie that was making fun of that very notion, and which just again indicates it's not, these people aren't sensitive. They're really just, they're looking for something to call attention to themselves.
Do you think that's just a generation thing, or do you think it's made like, because it's both, like, people always put blame on millennials or Generation Z, but some of the people complaining are Gen Xers.
Yeah.
Like it's not all. What do you think it is? It's
technology. I think it's technology and everybody being with it. Because it's I don't blame the younger generation really. I for all of the things that everybody likes to blame millennials on, there's a reason why a lot of this stuff is happening right now, and I would definitely give a lot of millennials credit for being a generation that really is using a lot of it is call out culture to some extent, which I'm not a big fan of, but it is bringing, it's making some noise that's getting people motivated to. It's the equal energy that's then kind of energizing people my age and older streets and constantly protest and make some things change. And things are being done what the thing about it is, like, we'll see how this sustains. But I give young people a lot of credit for all of that, because I think if that wasn't happening, I don't know how much outrage really, because people get tired. I'm 43, man. I barely I barely have the energy to just do anything, man. I mean, it's not like, I don't feel so old, but I definitely feel like, like a lot of the things I used to, I love playing in bands. I love doing all this other stuff. Now I just like, that's why this shelter in place thing is fucking great. I love staying home.
Yeah.
I love, not having to do much. And, just right up my alley.
I was meant to ask you, or I don't think I've ever asked you, why, like, cause it's a weird thing what we do. I mean, you do it more. Yeah, you're actually doing it full time, stand-up comedy. What made you want to decide to be a comic?
It was really more of a decision. It was a stupid notion that I had a band called Bad Touch that was that had a comedic thread through it. Like, there was, when we started it, I said this is, I've loved stand-up comedy since I was a kid, but I never wanted to be one. I always thought,
same here.
I always thought comedians were definitely like blues men, where they were hard living people that lived lonely lives and wrote jokes around it, and they die from either they die sad old deaths, or they die early from drug overdoses or whatever the fuck else. And so it was never attractive. And then but I always was inspired by, like, even in my music, comedy inspired it. And then when I started this band, that I had a notion of, like, having a kind of a Don Rickles attitude towards the audience with this band. It started this process of, came up with the name, the alter ego of Mean Dave. My drummer was Crazy Eric, and we did this routine that was like, it was definitely improvised, and it worked. And we watched music audiences laugh in between songs, and we kept that going. And then the band was kind of growing stagnant, and then I thought, maybe if I do stand-up comedy, it'll help promote the band, which was, as I call it, it was the transition. It was the first step in the transition into comedy, the way Happy Gilmore did that long drive contest, and found out he was a golfer. Like, he thought he was a hockey player his entire life. I thought I was a musician my entire life. And then as I got into it and started to see that, like, maybe my skill set is better suited for this, and maybe there's a better future as far as looking at it like a job. But that didn't come easy by any means. I also, the only reason why I got into it was because I thought all my favorite comedians were old men, and so I was like, you know what? If maybe this is the job. If I start now, by the time I'm like 65, and if I'm not dead, I'll have an ability to make a living doing this, making just bare minimum money. When I can't lift, 50 pounds or something, and do just a regular day-to-day job. So this is really just an investment in my retirement of developing a persona that, because I kind of think I've always been an old man since I was a kid, and I always feel like I'm just growing into myself. Like
you have that old man.
I walk like one. Everybody see, I walk like an old man since I was a kid. I've always had bad knees, and I've been born wishing I was never here. So it's like, that's just my attitude, and then I've lived a lot of my young bullshit, and now it's just more like, I just feel like life is just killing time till death, but I have a good attitude about it,
right?
So
that's funny, because whenever I perform with you before the show is starting, you have this like, God, I wish I was home face.
Not that. That's not. What's funny is, it's not that I wish I. No, it's, I can't. I want to say, like, I like watching. It's funny. My friend told me something a while ago, and he said, because I used to wonder why people would get really defensive with me that I didn't know. Like, people would get mad at me without even knowing me, like on the street or whatever. And my friend said something that I'll always remember. He goes, "Well, Dave, I don't know if anybody's told you this, but whenever you look at them like they're a fucking idiot." And I was like, I said, okay, point taken. Like, I can see that. And so it's like, it's lessened in my recovery, because my attitude's different now, and I've definitely been a lot more approachable. I can tell, because everybody asks me for fucking directions. Everybody, It's true. Like I get the strangest people. Like, and when I say strange, I mean the most normal looking motherfuckers that are walking around or they're lost. They'll pull over. I'll be walking on the street. Some old white dude will pull over and be like, "Excuse me, do you know which way is Thornton?" Or and I'm like, "What about me?" Just screams like, "Oh yeah, this heavy metal looking motherfucker on the side of the road. He knows where he's going." And it's like I don't Google.
These are my roads.
Yeah, Google Maps. Fuck that. No, this dude on the road knows what's up. And it's just something about it. But yeah, I get that shit all the time, and which just tells me it's like I don't know. It's nice to feel like people aren't. I used to intimidate people. I still do from time to time, but for the most part, I have to remind myself it's better to be an approachable person than to be an asshole nobody wants to talk to.
Yeah. So. Hey, I gotta ask you, when you were younger, because I it's funny, man. I've known you for a long time, mostly obviously mostly on Facebook and comments, but I never really asked you. Were you like because the way you are, because I know how you are. You were you like a class clown when you were a kid?
Not at all. No.
Yeah,
I was quiet.
That's one thing I've noticed about people who are comics.
I still don't think I'm funny. I was a quiet kid who definitely had dreams of a school shooter, but I'm serious because
aspirations.
Yeah, no, it's more just you daydream. That's why I'm like I still whenever there's school shooters, I'm like I get it. Like it's just I never acted out on it. Like I'm just like I'm not gonna go get a gun. I'm not gonna there's consequences. I don't want to go to prison.
Yeah,
because then I'm gonna go be I don't if I'm in juvenile hall, there's gonna be fucking ass rapers there. I don't need that shit. But it's nice to daydream. And I definitely was like, because I was a small kid, I get picked on a lot. But then my attitude, and I admired psychos. I looked up to, I would study serial killers, just not because I thought they were so interesting, but because I noticed that like their behavior, I would just imitate a sociopath to keep people to leave me alone. And I definitely have some sociopathic behavior in myself, but I also knew that I'm somebody. I have feelings. I come from good parents who fucked me up as a kid, but made up for it a lot as an adult and in my teenage years. They definitely, they just had a loud, rowdy divorce, but they all were all my parents. I have 4 parents, two like mom and dad and a stepmom and stepdad, and they all were like putting their lives together as I was becoming a teenager and whatnot. And I have great relationships with all of them today after a lot of ups and downs. And then, I just nursed a real bad drug and alcohol problem I lived my teenage years, my rebellious teenage years in my 20s and early 30s. And so I got that out of my system. And then I worked in video game testing for like 14 years, which it was a cool job at first, but then once you start working in video games and you see how they're made, you realize that they have like a built-in obsolescence to them, and they cease to become challenging, and you don't enjoy them as much. And so I lost interest in video games and was still working in that line of work for like another 6 years, and I hated my life. And so the one thing that's great about finding stand-up comedy was that it's a creative outlet that I can it's a challenge to express your ideas honestly, but it should be, because it's not some forum to just spout off your brain with no filter and then say it's comedy, I can say what I want. That's stupid. It's more
in the same sense though, if you were to say what you just said about the school shooters, like I get it.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't have said that in a funny way, then it'd be like, all right, guys, it's been a voice party. We gotta go.
You want to know what? This is what stand-up comedians or the aspiring ones, the wannabes, the open micers. What they do is they go up on the day of a school shooting and start talking about it with no punchline, with no real thought behind it, with no insight, especially. And think that that's okay. And it's like, no, what I was just expressing was an honest thought from when I was a kid. But in the context of today, you see it all through that. That's why my nickname, it's like Mean Dave is just a nickname. It's short for Meaningful David. What I say, if it does sound mean, it's not without a sense of thought and purpose and heart, I would say. Like, and those the hardest jokes that I have that definitely are the most insensitive are definitely did not come from a place of, oh, let me just people off. That's not the point. There definitely was a point, and what sucks is that a lot of my best jokes, I love it when a smart audience gets what I'm doing. But then also there's a risk to that. Chappelle experienced this with Chappelle's show. The flip side to that is that if you're doing risky jokes that some will deem you an edgelord in doing that, the risk of if you're doing them from an honest point of view is that you will cultivate a portion of the audience that thinks that it's cool to talk about troublesome subjects and think that's the point, and that's not the fucking point. It's like you're kind of it's one of those things when like guys look at Bill Burr and some of the shit he does and think it's okay to then spout off about the problematic topics that he's willing to do. The thing saying, it's like these guys juggle fire. All right. When you see somebody who's juggled fire or chainsaws and you get an urge to juggle, do you start with juggling fire or chainsaws? No. You learn how to fucking juggle first, you moron. And funny that you bring up Louis C.K. because I have a joke around this very topic about Louis C.K. and Doug Stanhope. These were guys who wrote jokes that, albeit I could see them being funny, but they wrote jokes around saying the N-word on stage and would talk about how, you know, and they have an audience. They have people, you know, a variety, you know, mostly white, but their audience they have a mixed following in many respects, and they were able to make the jokes both. They were totally wrong, but funny, and that was part of what made it funny, was that it was wrong, and but then it inspired a whole generation of these dumb, young, mostly white motherfuckers who get on stage at the open mics and think that's what that they can now do that. And I'd be like, no, that's not what you fucking do, moron. And so I wrote a whole joke around that. They started with the premise, and then it went into this. And the punchline was written at Dorsey's locker by the audience there when I was talking about just this very topic. And it's so that's the thing. It's like I do feel a sense of responsibility with the jokes that I write. That if they are touching upon certain subject matter, I gotta be careful of where I say them into what audience. Like I have to have an audience's trust, I have to feel damn confident that I can pull it off, regardless of what the subject matter is. And for the most part, they work. So,
you know, that's the thing I've noticed with because sometimes these new comics, these guys that just, you know, I mean, I still feel like a new comic, even though I did my first show back in 2012, you know, but I remember back when I started. I was just, I had that mentality. Let me just get raunchier or whatever, you know. And I had an older comic who kind of checked me on that and said, you know, and I don't even think Sergio Barajas, you know Sergio Barajas, right?
Yeah, I know Barajas. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. He kind of pulled me to the side and he said, you know, you just focus on staying true to yourself and be funny. Yeah. If you can be funny without that, you're going to be okay.
You're trying to be shocking. You're trying to get the audience's attention.
And at that time I was, because I saw that it worked on one stage, but, you know, he said that's not going to always work, and you got to be able to work all rooms, not just, you know. I mean, that's kind of the gist that he told me, and I see it now that I'm not in it like you are, you know, but I've been in it for a while now, and I see that these guys that start off, and then it maybe works at a room, and then they just want to go and, like, you know, I've had like these guys. I've been doing stand up for 6 months, man. I've been killing it. Let me come on your podcast. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
it's like, well, look at all these memes I've made. I'm sure you get a lot of that.
Yeah, it's funny because for the most part, I think the cool thing about having this stupid stage name is a lot of people steer clear of me when they're unsure of themselves. So I don't get. But there's definitely. I always like to call it the short yellow bus of comedy. You'll get the people that are kind of a lap behind, and you know, throughout it. And I've seen people with also several years make these same rookie mistakes, and also I'm no, you know, I've made my own mistakes and stuff, and have to remind myself of, you know, just kind of to how to be in touch. I did a show not too long ago. Where there was a woman in the front, and the audience, the audience was digging my set, but this one woman, she just looked like my thought about it was like, if there was a car door between me and her, she would lock it and roll the window up. Just the way that she was, her body language was towards me. And I pointed it out, and she gave me the nicest, meanest heckle I've ever gotten, where she said, "I just don't think you're very good and you need to get better." And the audience was so taken aback more than I was. I was shocked. I was just like, "Hey, I got to give you props because I agree." And I look at you and I'm like, you paid for this show and the punchline's that way, like, you know, and it's like, and I'm also a host at the Punchline, so, you know, I'm just saying. And it was funny it was just one of those things where I kind of was like, I play devil's advocate to that because, you know, I by no means, I don't look at like, oh, I've been doing stand up 10 years. Cause no, I look at it just from the same perspective as all the shallow assholes where it's like, you've been doing 10 years and this is where you're at. I look at it like, yeah, but if you knew me and you know what I've reached my goal of what I want to do with this and keep going, even though it's been 10 years and knowing what my goals were in it and why I do this. I know who I am and why I do this. I dare any of these motherfuckers who are even getting like scraps of TV appearances and all that. They don't even know what they want to do with this shit. And I've already seen people that were like the people that everybody puts on a pedestal. I've seen some already get deflated and you know, who've had a little taste of something but then didn't have anything to follow it up with, and people holding on to this one credit from like 6 years ago, and it's not I look at it like I would rather be anonymous and able to make my own way through reputation and content with my life than looking at than always even if people are looking up to you, always being unsure and feeling empty, like nothing's ever working out. So
right. And you know, I share the same sentiment because I remember, you know, Juan Medina. He
I know him.
Yeah. What was it?
I love Juan. He's
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he posted this. You know how goofy he is. He posted this thing.
Goofy.
He said something about.
He's angry more than
like,
goofy.
What's your goal with stand up or something? Yeah. He asked every comic, and I remember there's some like newer comics commenting some, you know, a Netflix special. I remember just thinking, I'm just happy that I'm involved. You know, that's like,
and that's the weirdest. That's a great attitude to have because it's the healthiest attitude. With my buddy Mike Bucci, who put on these shows, that's exactly why you know there's a reason why we stay friends, JD, and that's just because we're people and our creative aspects are just an extension of us. I'm just fortunate enough that I've figured out a do-it-yourself hustle with it. It's by no means guaranteed. And the great thing about this coronavirus shelter in place, it's been a great equalizer. It shut down everybody from the top of to the bottom of the line open micer, and everybody was equally bummed. And if there's one thing I love is watching everybody be put on the same playing field. So I've been enjoying more watching all of these sad fucking people just, I miss stand up. I'm like, I'm fucking loving this. I'm like, Cartman, I'll drink your fucking tears, man. I'll do Zoom shows until the end if it means never seeing you ever achieve your dream in the way that you think. And it's not like because I don't want people's dreams to come true. I just think some of these people were really cool people when I met them when they first were starting, and they turned into really shitty people as they've gained some small sense of social acceptance in the comedy realm. And I hate that. I definitely prefer people that stay themselves. And all the best headliners that I've gotten to work with have all been totally fucking cool people. And that's something that I think speaks to the level of character of the full-time working comic. That, you know, the guys, Eddie Pepitone, Tom Rhodes, who else? Judy Tenuta, Big J Okerson. Just these guys were just regular people that, they just happened to be stand-up comedians that made it work, and they don't think of themselves as some like they're making it and they're stars and whatever. No, this is just what they do. And you know, one of my favorite to bullshit with was Brett Ernst. You know, he was in a movie the wild was it the wild comedy tour show, whatever, Vince Vaughn's wild comedy thing or whatever, Wild West comedy or some shit. And it was back in the 2000s, and then he became a national headliner in clubs and stuff like that. But he's not like by any means a household name, but he is a maniac. He works a lot with Carlos Rodriguez out of Sacramento. And I got to host for him, and I love this dude. He is a fucking maniac. He's a Jersey bro, but he's very smart. And but most people would write him off as like, oh, he's some Jersey fucking bro guy or whatever. It's like, nah, I love a guy who reminds me of like the Northeast. Who loves to hold court, and he's funny. And so I just sat there and listened half the time. And I think half the time he also was like, hey, what the fuck? Why do you call you Mean Dave? You just sit here all quiet. And like, because I love listening to somebody who's kind of mean. Like I love listening to real mean people. And it's not that he's mean. He's honest and he's blunt.
Yeah.
And he doesn't pull punches. And I love that about him. And he was a really cool dude. He was a regular guy. So yeah.
What like? Yeah, I think you talked a little bit. As far as comedy influences, you mentioned Don Rickles earlier. Like, who's one of those comics that you watched that you were like, man, I would love to do that one day?
Well, Rickles wasn't so much an idol. Rickles, I came up.
No, I just said you mentioned.
Oh no, I mentioned him because I read the Rickles book, which I actually got from my dad, and I borrowed it off of him, and I loved the Rickles book. And Rickles was the inspiration behind Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, which was my real love. I love that character that Robert Smigel made. It's so fucking funny. And as far as stand-ups, the ones that, when I was a kid, I actually memorized the specials by Bill Cosby himself. I remember had that memorized. I had Bobcat Goldthwait's Is He Like That all the time memorized. It was an HBO special. And I had Dennis Miller's Black and White memorized, his special. And those are not comics that Bill Cosby definitely with his popularity at the time, but for a kid, like even Bill Cosby wasn't like appealing to kids. Eddie Murphy, everybody loved Eddie Murphy. I liked Bill Cosby. There was something to his stories that I loved, and those three were not usual for a kid. And then as I got older, I joked that I got out of I kind of wrestling and stand-up comedy were like two things I lost interest in as I became a teenager. But then, Chris Rock hit it big with his the first special that he did.
The one with the leather?
No. Leather well, he was wearing a leather suit, but it wasn't Bigger and Blacker. It was the one before that.
Okay.
It was Bring the Pain. Bring the Pain. So he did Bring the Pain, and that was because I remember Chris Rock as being the guy that was like, oh, he was kind of funny on Saturday Night Live, but not really. It's like he had a funny presence, but he never quite hit. And then CB4, I remember, came out around that time, and that was funnier. But when Bring the Pain came out, that was fucking hilarious. So Bring the Pain kind of made me pay attention to stand up more. And then Dave Chappelle hit us with Killing Him Softly, that was the first time I memorized a special since I was a kid, and that inspired a lot. And then next thing you know, Chappelle Show was around the corner a couple years later. We all Chappelle Show was funny and was enjoyable first season, but then it blew up and became everybody's after the Rick James sketch. And that's what made it a cultural phenomenon. I almost feel like that ruined Chappelle Show because it was kind of like this thing that was it was hilarious, but not everybody knew about it. Not everybody was people who watched South Park and stuck with it after South Park, they were into it. But it was kind of this cool thing. And then just like anything that's good, as soon as one thing turns it into now everybody's watching it, now you got morons watching it and they're going to fucking ruin it by, next thing you know, you got white people saying the N-word like it's cool. And it's like, no, you're not supposed to be saying that shit. It's, and you got people.
You missed the point.
Yeah. It's like that's again goes back to the point of what Chappelle was realizing in that third season was that he was making jokes that were definitely intelligent satire regarding the subjects of race, but the weird thing, and I'm sure Pryor reached this too, is that it also was funny to racists who didn't get the point, who just thought it was like just looking at it, and that's the danger of doing some comedy that is so smart that then stupid people will see the wrong shit in it. So
So those are like your. I guess you answered it in a better way because you mentioned special.
Yeah, those yeah.
I had I mean, growing up, you know, I watched Cantinflas with my dad. I don't know if you're familiar
I've
with that.
saw the movie about him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't seen that movie yet.
It's pretty good.
I grew up watching. Yeah, no, I've heard. I grew up watching that, and I remember telling jokes to my parents, and I didn't really get into stand up, like American stand up comedy until I was a little older. I remember one of the first specials that I did watch was Chris Rock, the Bigger and Blacker.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, man, I don't know if I don't know if I could do that. You know, like it just seems so, because I used to tell one-liners when I was a kid. That was like my thing. I used to tell one-liners in Spanish, you know.
Yeah.
But when I saw him and he just went on, it was just like, oh damn, like this is that's intense. I'm like, I don't think I could do, you know. But
it's just one-liners in talking about real subjects. I mean, you're talking about real subjects, and you throw the one-liners in there.
And you know, as I got older, once I wasn't planning on getting involved with stand up. I actually, one of the first shows that I went to was I went to see Gaspar.
Oh, Gaspar Bernal. Oh shit, he's one-liner, dude. Yeah.
Yeah, and it just, I've seen, because of course I've seen celebrity comics doing, or, you know, like Fluffy at one of my first actual comedy shows, but seeing local guys performing, and it just kind of blew my mind. And then once I got into stand-up, then I kind of discovered this whole, like, you know, a couple people introduced me to Carlin, of course Chappelle, Bill Hicks, and it blew my mind away, man. For you, like those specials that you mentioned, like I have a few specials that I'll every once in a while, because I'm sure you've had this before, where you kind of, I mean, actually, I don't know if you've had this before, where you after you perform or whatever, and you have a bit of a writer's block, or where not even a writer's block, where you just can't even be funny in everyday life.
Oh, I always feel that, you know, ever since I got into stand-up and actually started working at it and saw it working, it completely has devalued any humor I have in my day-to-day life. And that's probably the one thing that, like, I was definitely a funnier person as a person prior to doing stand-up.
I'm happy to hear you say that, because that makes me feel normal.
Yeah, no, I think it's completely normal, because it's just like anything else. If you know, like I imagine if you take, like, you know, a boxer or a fighter, and you put them out in the day-to-day world. I mean, it's like they may have been somebody who enjoyed a street fight, but then you know, one of the things that you'll notice about the temperament of people who actually work in fighting and all that, they tend to be pretty calm people. They're not people that
super mellow
that are looking for a fight, and if anything, they're doing everything to avoid a fight, because they also know the danger of not only just their own skills, but like the legal ramifications of it. They have more thought into it. And so that's why when I look at doing stand-up, it's like, that's why it always gets me when there are people who are naturally hilarious as people, and stand-up is definitely the refined version of them, and they're maniacs off stage. I ran into, you know, there's Kabir Singh is somebody locally who I put in that category. There's Josh Blue, when I got to host for him. He is just a lovable maniac, but he is a fucking maniac. This dude, he carries a knife with him around that is so goddamn funny, because it's like I don't know if you know who Josh Blue is, but he's a comedian with cerebral palsy who I think and he was on like Last Comic Stand. I think he won it the year that he was on it, and so I go to host for him, and I walk up to the punchline, and he's out front, so I'm introducing myself to him, and he's like, "Oh, nice to meet you, dude." And there were these people playing, they were sparring. They were like kind of doing dueling with they were dressed up as Jedi, and they had like some fake lightsabers, and so they were jousting and doing the lightsaber fucking playing around with it, and it caught Josh's attention, and he's looking, he goes, "What the fuck are these people doing?" And he reaches into his little shady bag he carries with him, and he pulls out the shadiest fucking knife I've ever seen. And, like, right out there in front of his two friends too that were talking to him, these two women, and I started dying laughing, and they started laughing because they knew him, and they knew that this is kind of one of the things. He carries this knife around with him to kind of like it's both a joke, but it's also like to kind of keep people kind of to test people, because he is a dude with cerebral palsy who deals with able-bodied people who are trying to take advantage of him all the time. And so it's nice to kind of scare him into, it's a good scare. And I fucking loved it. I started dying, and I even took a picture of him with me. We took a picture together that I have with him brandishing the knife, and it's so fucking awesome. So yeah.
No, I know a couple of guys that if it wasn't for stand-up, they'd be maniacs, and they get to be maniacs a little bit on stage.
Oh yeah.
Mario he's done the show before, and he talked about that. Like, of course, he's very open about his addictions and his recovery, and that's one of those guys where he's such a sweet guy.
Yeah.
But there, you could tell if it wasn't for stand-up, like, man, watch out.
Yeah. Oh, totally. No, because he found stand-up and he got in recovery just as he was like starting to do it, or so. I forget the exact thing, because he actually. I had him speak at one of the meetings that I secretary and stuff, so, and perform. Yeah. So.
One of the things that I mean, I was when I first started, one of the things that another comic told me was of course we have a camaraderie with comics amongst each other, but don't get too comfortable, because a lot of comics, they may be funny as hell, they have a lot of demons, and sometimes it just to be cautious. Have you experienced that?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, mostly as far as like, it's it's not so much that I got to keep my guard on amongst comics. Right. It's much as just knowing I've been fortunate that when I got in recovery, I apply a lot of it to my comedy life, in that if you're going to do this, just like any other profession, you get with people that you definitely like, that you bond with, that you find a foundation of your friends. Really find your friends in work. When you work at a job, you make friends with some of your coworkers.
Definitely.
And you those are people that hopefully are your peers. Hopefully they also work at it like you do and all that stuff, because you'll find very quickly, which I did also as well, when I got into it and I was still drinking and I was partying with other comics. There's comics that definitely, it's just like, when you're going, I always say doing stand-up is like going back to junior high as an adult. And there's choices. And if you make choices and you surround yourself with people that are doing shit that isn't exactly working towards stand-up comedy, you'll probably not see those people last very long. So if you're partying with comics and think that's what comedy is all about, if you're doing if you're doing things that spend more time doing what you're not supposed to be doing off stage, and the things that you're trying to focus on and making sure that doing your best work on stage, you're probably gonna find yourself dissatisfied and wondering why everybody else is doing this, that, or the other, and why you're left out. Yeah.
Was it
in a way, but not? Was it
not
really.
The same
when
you were doing music?
The strange thing about music is that you can be an awful musician, and a place for you with bad behavior, and have it be accepted. Like what's strange now in a lot of the kind of in the age of Me Too, it's affected the DIY music scene as well. And so I've watched, it's funny when we have our history with Burnt Ramen, there's a lot of people that are, because there were a lot of dudes that were trying to hook up with underage girls there, and as well as, I'm sure I don't know exactly what there were definitely, women too doing whatever, but there was a lot of shit that went on there. There's, people partying with minors. There's just a lot of illegal shit. And as
I was a minor in there,
exactly, because it was an all ages club, but that supposedly had no rules. But now, as people have gotten older, and they're starting to apply what I like to call this backwards compatibility of the Me Too movement onto their past, and there's definitely scumbags. Don't get me wrong, but I was like, they were scumbags then. It's by no means excusing any of their behavior. It's just sort of like, I was a teenager. And I knew who scumbags were. I knew that dudes that were in their 20s that were trying to prey on teenagers weren't cool. And it's like, as I got older and I saw this culture that was around, like me and my band I played there at times, Funeral Shock. Cause I was still pretty young when Woozor was around, so we didn't really see too many of we would play more 21 and over places, even though they weren't 21. But we, when I was older and I was playing in this band Funeral Shock, and we would see youngsters at a lot of the shows, we were kind of mindful of like, we don't want to be sticking around too long, because we're in our late 20s, heading into our 30s at the time. We're seeing a lot of our contemporaries in that scene were teenagers and entering their early 20s. It's funny to see a lot of those guys today. I'm still friends with a few of them, and they're in their late 20s, early 30s. I see a lot of them at meetings. It's a strange thing that like back then. It's and I'm glad that people are trying to find I don't know, they're just trying to do the right thing. But at the same time, when it was back then, I'm like, you weren't that dumb. Like, I don't, I always feel like there's some level of accountability that needs to be taken. And not to say that you can't call out people for their shitty behavior, but also recognize your own shitty behavior too. You're a shitty teenager. So anyway.
I mean, I would say, as someone that works with teenagers for a living, that some of them do have a certain level of naivete, and they could potentially be manipulated by who they perceive to be an older, cooler guy. And I mean, and then there are some teenagers that obviously know what they're doing and know better, and they're like, no, I'm just going to do this anyway. But some of them are like, no, he really loves me, and he really,
It's true. No, that's totally true. And
at that point,
that's it's one of those things where I'm like, that's the manipulation, and definitely it's a lot easier when you've got your teenager drinking and doing drugs. So,
hey, are you because you just talked about it? Are you still doing music, or are you?
I don't ever say I'm done with it. It's just I don't drive anymore. I haven't driven in like 6 years, so I don't have a car to like transport shit. I got my instruments. Right. I got to do the closest thing to music. I added my friend had me write and do guest vocals on a song on. My friend has a band called Captain Three Leg that's over there in Iowa. It's kind of like it's quite a hybrid band, but it's like the majority of their music's like hardcore, but like really goofy hardcore, and kind of almost of the spaz vein, but they venture into other genres and stuff. And they had a split that they were doing with this band Taco Tuesday, and they have guest vocals on all the songs, and he asked if I would write and do vocals for this one song. And I definitely I'm a fan of their band. I'm like, I would totally do it. And he goes, well, just so you know, we may not want to, like, once you write it, if we don't like it, we may not use it. And I'm like, that's fine. I know the guy very well, and I'm totally okay with his rejection. But I also was like, I'm a fan of the band, so I would feel like if what I was doing wasn't up to snuff, I would know if you wouldn't use it. So I wrote these lyrics that were kind of responding to this one comedian that I was kind of at odds with. The song's called Young Man, and it is sort of it's funny because it's sort of making fun of I'm not talking so much to him, I'm talking to myself. I'm like, because when I was a young man, I thought I knew everything too, and right now that's one of the things I think that's interesting about the time. It's funny, we're talking about teenage naivete. Everybody's so exposed to so many things at a younger age today that I was exposed to probably in my late teens or early 20s. And when you have teenagers right now that are like doing they're doing they see the thing with the George Floyd, and you have these really rotten kids that are imitating it. Like, that's one of the trends of some highly problematic youth imitating it on and sharing it on social media. That's not
George Floyd challenge, right?
Yeah, that's not a coincidence. These are kids, and I dare people to find out if it's really there's kids do rotten shit, and it's because they're little fucks, and So so that's why it's like and I in the punk scene, these were like some of the thing I've always found in like the punk scene was that they were actually some of the most heartfelt, thoughtful, intelligent people that I found at their age. Like, I mean, I was a naive kid. I was definitely a naive kid because I used to go to shows too, thrash shows and with adults and all that kind of stuff. And I was also the kind of kid where I was always skeptical of adults. So like, I didn't, if I did meet an older person who like, would seduce me with some cool stuff, I didn't want to stay long. And I remember one time I was skateboarding in Pleasanton, and this one dude with a Megadeth shirt and a mullet, he's in the neighborhood, and he goes, "Hey man, you come over here," or whatever. I just didn't trust him. Like, I was a metalhead. I just, I looked at him. I'm like, yeah, you look like everybody. I don't like your fucking style, man. I'm like, I'm good. No thanks. I kept skating, and I am a very naive person. So that's why it's kind of like, I give young people a lot more credit maybe than they deserve, but they also they can be some real, but on the flip side of that, there's also some highly intelligent, highly sensitive people that are young, that are what I feel is like, again, key to what's going on right now. And that's that.
They're leading the charge.
So,
that's true.
In a great way. And I mean, that's why I'm like, just keep going, keep doing, sometimes that focus might look at me and be like, well, what are you doing, Dave? I'm like, well, I'm just going to jerk off in my room and really not, I'm not hurting anybody. And I don't think I'm not, jerking off with my knee on somebody's neck. So I think I'm okay. And but aside from I will champion you. And also one of my jokes that like I've been working on was, I said I'm all for everything in the Black Lives Matters movement and all these kinds of things, but it has made it a little bit awkward between me and because some of my best friends right now are black dudes, and they're from recovery and stuff, and one of the days of the protest, and here, I'll read it. I texted my friend Akil. He's pretty much one of my best friends right now in my life, and very cool dude. I call him Nice Cube. He looks like a nice ice cube. So
if Ice Cube was friendly.
Which is great because I'm Mean Dave, so nothing's funnier than Mean Dave and Nice Cube, So it's. And
you mean Ice Cube from Are We There Yet?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, even that, he's got a furrowed brow, man. That's like,
yeah.
So, but let me find this text. Because it was, we were talking about. Oh man, we talked a lot about recovery here. Let's see if I can find it. But I basically was telling him that. I said, I'm feeling guilty looking at all these protests because I'm worried whether or not I've been nice enough to you the last month. And I'm like, are you okay, man? And he goes, oh yeah, dude. My dad's just having surgery, but I think he's okay. But and he knows my sense of humor. And I said, I just worry. I'm just like, do I have to be nicer to him? Do I have to like open the door? And I said, I made a joke of like, it's like when you know that you're in a relationship with a girl and it's not going any well because you're asking, are you okay too much? And that's, I don't want to turn into that guy around my black friends. So, and that's just a joke about all that shit. And I could tell when I did it at a show, it was still a little too hot button a topic to bring up, but for later. So.
What as man, you totally threw me off with that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I have been. I talk, with my black friends. I do like. I want to know what their thoughts on all this, because it is a scary.
Well, I don't see one on the show right now, JD. So you don't want to know that bad, do you? I'm kidding. I'm fucking with you, man. So. That's what everybody's been doing right now. So
I was always worried about that because I know, because when we started this thing, it was it just happened, and I was always worried about. Well, not always, but I just started thinking about because people were going to say, "Oh, you don't have a woman on your."
Oh God, don't worry about that shit. That's
no, but that's the thing. Yeah. Like that's the thing right now.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was kind of because I had a friend. He has his band in Antioch, and they're like a hardcore band, and they got booted out of a show for not having any women in their lineup.
Weird. And, well, maybe it was the show itself. Was it some? I guess, it might have been some feminist cause or something.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that and you know we're at what, we're at one Mexican dude, a white guy, a black guy, and whatever the hell.
Oh, you do it.
Gaspar
You
is.
okay? I can't see anybody, so if you got a black dude on here, we're good.
I mean,
Joaquin.
I'm also quarter Latino, so I'm covering so many bases.
As my black friends tell me, that just means you're white, according to them. I'm kidding. No, they do tell me that. Like I've had that happen like so many times where like black comics will just be, all right, this next dude, I don't know, he's cool for a white dude. I'm like, I'm not white, motherfucker. I just sound white. I know what you mean. I grew up in the suburbs. I know what I sound like, but so.
Hey, what? So you, I think you mentioned it earlier. For people, our listeners that want to check you out, that want to see what you've been doing, because right now, like Phil says, content is king. Where can people find you on social media or see your YouTube shows that you have?
You just said it, YouTube. No, YouTube.com. You can.
What's
the name of the show is In the Meantime with Mean Dave. The name of the channel you won't remember as much because it's youtube.com/the explainer, THEE explainer. It's a rap name I used to use when I started the fucking channel, but I mean, you hear how much I explain, it kind of explains itself. But yeah, just look up In the Meantime with Mean Dave and you should be able to find it. Or just if you look up Mean Dave Comedian, you can find what my YouTube videos and eventually my channel. And then
you have two podcasts. Right?
I don't. They're kind of. It's not so much podcast. Like, well, In the Meantime with Mean Dave is like formerly a podcast that became a YouTube web series. And then the podcast that I was doing with my friend Erie Diamond was called Another Terrible Podcast by Comics, and we were doing that up until the COVID, until the shelter in place, and then we converted that into a live podcast on Zoom for a show. So we do it as a live podcast show. So it's both, it's a podcast, but we have an audience, so it's not as indulgent, and we kind of feel like a need to service the audience, and it works really great because the audience is kind of somewhat involved. We have them on the chat and stuff, and we talk about current topics and stuff. So I've been doing that with her for about a year, but I'm going to be like kind of branching off from the show. Like I'll still be on it occasionally, but I've already been like, I'm not doing it this Sunday. We have a guest host, Sarah Gianbruno, and because I told her I
perform with her.
Yeah, she's great, and I love her to pieces. Yeah. And but it's just sort of a time to kind of like start, because I already told her like after we've been doing the shelter in place shows have been great, but as we are like as we're going to start opening back up, I'm probably going to step away from that podcast regularly, and I'll still be involved, and I still definitely check it out. Our episodes, look up Another Terrible Podcast by Comics, you'll find it. You can find also the episodes from our Zoom shows on YouTube if you look up Another Terrible Podcast by Comics. You'll find that.
It's a great name.
I love the name. Yeah, no, totally. And it's a cop out, so that way we can have a terrible podcast and say, yeah, that's what it's called. Right. But it's really, the thing about it is it's really a cool podcast. I enjoy it. I just know that it's one of those things where I want Erie to grow as well, and I think she'll benefit from like more of a rotating lineup of hosts, and kind of, and that's just me because I've been just been around, and I'm like, okay, I want to step into it more as like as a guest and less of a co-host. So
right, it's funny you say that because like when I originally wanted to start a podcast, well, one of the original ideas was just to do it with Gaspar, but like I enjoy. I mean, because Gaspar's barely here, but
but you can feel his presence. I remember Gaspar's
you can hear his little giggles whenever you say something horrible.
I love his sense of humor too, man. I always his one-liners are great.
Yeah, and I enjoy doing the podcast with people who are non-comics. My Phil and do you recommend comics to start a podcast?
Hell no! Get the more normal the people that can have a regular conversation, the better. You kidding me? Fuck comics, man, because they're always trying to be funny. Like the ones that are at this level, they think that and not all of them, but majority of them, they think they always have.
Yeah, because there's some new comics that I met over the years, and like some of them they do it, they're really good, and then they just leave, and then some of them when they come on, they like you said, they have that thing that some older comics don't even have. and I like interacting with them because it makes me excited about comedy.
So I say find the people that if you like somebody and you connect with somebody and they seem like a cool person, invite them on, do something with them, because I that's how basically all of my like, again, my foundation of like friendship and people I choose to work with is first rooted in, do I get along with them as people? Thing is, I look at, do I believe in them as comics, and somewhat self-aware of like kind of the level of work they do. And then after that, if that works out, then it's like, I mean, and usually these things are not like, they aren't like requirements I check off a list. It's just who I find myself surrounding myself with over time. And that's really just, it's kind of the same thing that I applied for my recovery. They say get with the winners, and my definition of a winner is not the same as like the vast majority of the way comedy looks at like, oh, these are, the people that with a fucking television credit barely anybody saw, or people that do this or that, and they're chasing some fucking cheese in the maze that they'll never get. And I don't get into that. I liken, I said this to a friend of mine in an interview, that my life tends to be more, there's a movie, corny ass movie, Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life, I've always
classic.
and I love that movie. It's even part of one of my jokes, because I say it's a movie that is what is it? It's about a guy who thinks he wishes he was dead around Christmas time. He reaches the end of his ropes, and it's one of those movies that he's a fail. He then tries to kill himself, and he fails at that. So it's like he's a failure on top of a failure in a nice white neighborhood where no one should be failing. And I said, and that just lifts my spirits every Christmas. And so, but more important to the ending, the Frank Capra classic ending of because he was a character. George Bailey was a guy who had big dreams when he was young. He had all these plans to leave his town and go do these amazing things, travel the world. And anything that right before he would be about to leave, every time something would happen that would keep him at home, where he would have to help the town and be responsible and be of service to others. And he did this so much that then at some point in his life, he felt trapped, and he faced the fear of that. Here he was in a marriage, in what looked like a happy marriage. He had kids, he had a family, and all these things. But through one circumstance of misplacing the money, he's now scared shitless and afraid that everything's going to come down on him. And so he wishes that he was dead, and he tries to kill himself, and he fails. And the angel teaches him why, this is what happens if you didn't exist. And then he goes back to his town grateful. He returns back grateful. This is really, in recovery is full of this shit. But it's basically he's then reset back to that point in time, and he's completely grateful of his situation because he looks around and he's like, I have everything I need here, and not only that, he has the love of his family and his friends, and that it makes a man richer than anything else. And so I look at the world that I try to cultivate myself as being like, and I dare I say I have the best friends that anybody could ask for in recovery and in comedy. And it continues, and I keep that attitude forward, and I think it attracts again people that are very it brings out the best in people around me, and it attracts people that I really enjoy working with. So, is that sappy enough for everybody?
Well, no, definitely. It's.
I get the feeling you guys are crying.
I love that. Yeah, you know what? Hey, you know what? In real life, I know that Jimmy Stewart, the actor that played that part.
Please don't say he was a racist. I'm just kidding.
No. So I know that in real life, during World War II, a lot of celebrities were drafted in the war, and because James Stewart was a college graduate, he naturally sat in the officers' circle for a bit. But apparently, unlike most celebrities, like even like someone like John Wayne, who has the at least the outward market value of being Mr. Tough, Mr. Leader Man, he's done military pictures. Jimmy Stewart apparently took the role of his officership so seriously that they kept bumping him up in the ranks, and I think he is, I don't want to say he's the only celebrity at that time to reach as far as he did, but I think he was one of the very few. They after the war was sort of finished, he was supposed to relinquish his statement, his station, and just be a complete civilian and go back to making movies, but they kept him on. And so my grandfather was telling me, he says he had actually guessed as he was reading the newspapers why they were keeping him on. They liked him so much and they respected him so much. They kept him on until he got the rank of general, and then they let him.
Wow. Well, JD just told me that he got kicked off trying to get back on. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. And John Blaine's always had a notorious reputation for being a piece of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But I thought it was just kind of awesome that, his real life character seems to be just as about giving service as his fictional character in this movie was.
Totally.
Yeah,
I never even knew that about. I'm one of those people. It's like, yeah, I like the movie. That I know he's a nice guy. Never learned much about him, but yeah, that's great to hear. Shit, man. Yeah. Oh yeah, I love.
I'm gonna steal JD's question. Do you have favorite
the original
horror movies?
And then Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 3 are like a good close second. And then beyond that, really, I'm just like a kind of an all around. I enjoy horror just as much as any other genre. My favorite directors of all that, Wes Craven, Tobe Hooper. I think was like. He made one groundbreaking film, and he's still a good director, but he never quite, I like Part 2 also, but he never quite found his footing outside of those movies. And then, as far as modern day horror, I mean, you got directors like, if David Fincher ever, so much, there's horror elements in his movies that I fucking love. He makes horror seem like it's going to break out of the Social Network. And I love his movies. I love Tarantino movies. I love and Robert Rodriguez and all those guys from that era. And then there's not a lot of auteurs today. The way there used to be. I think a lot of studios, a lot of movies, even like independent pairing movies, are not the same. I forget what the last movie I saw was. That I saw that one movie. What was it? The Invisible Man that just came out recently. And that's made by, I'm forgetting his name, but it's the guy who wrote Saw, and he made also another movie, Upgrade. He's been in movies for a long time, but Invisible Woman was probably the first horror thriller I'd seen in a long time that was really interesting because it was incredibly subversive in the sense that I think they made a movie that was trying to show the female experience to men. Because it was because you're dealing with a woman who's being harassed and terrorized by an invisible man, and women could watch it and be like, yeah, that's like my day-to-day life, only I can see the motherfuckers. Whereas
Lee Weno,
Weno, something like that. Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you, but
yes, how about that?
Yeah, But when I saw it with my buddy Akil, actually, we saw it together, and after the movie, we both were like kind of shell shocked, and I was like, something about that movie makes me feel like that movie was intended to show men the female experience. So it's an interesting movie to watch because it was one of those movies that when I saw the trailer for it, I'm like, why is this movie being made now? Like in the age of Me Too, I would think the last thing people would want to really see is this woman terrorized by a man that you can't see, because it's called The Invisible Man, but it's not about the man, it's about the woman, and it has nothing to do with the classic HD. Not at all. It's if anything, what's so funny is that the technology that allows him to create this invisible man suit is really just kind of brushed over, and it's really just it's the point of what I think is a long metaphor. Which is, it's really just it's this woman who's terrorized by the patriarchy, because she's also being gaslit because no one will believe her, and then even after they find him, after they catch the guy in the suit, and it's and I don't want to spoil the movie, but they still don't believe her when she still knows something else is up after they catch the guy.
And it's funny because it's like she just proved to all of you that there was an invisible man chasing her the entire movie, and you still don't believe her. And which is what I think is like the ultimate like kind of point of the movie, and so that's why I was like, that's why when like I feel like women will watch it, some will enjoy. I've asked women about what they thought about it, and it's gotten mixed reviews from them, but a lot of dudes will watch it and they'll just be like, man, that shit was fucked up. So yeah, which
I know you've seen it, right, Phil? Okay, yeah, I
saw it at the drive-in last month.
About it, because you watch a movie and sometimes without thinking about what subliminal or what undertones there is, it's just oh, okay, yeah, it's just that movie. But now that you mentioned that's an interesting take on that. I didn't even.
What did Phil? What did you think of the movie?
That was awesome.
That was great.
I love that response.
No, it was because a lot of horror movies, especially nowadays, it's really hard to pull off. People go for the cheap scares, like jump scares and gore. But this is like a psychological thing. And they pulled it off really well. Like, you can tell the people who made this knew what they were doing and cared about their craft.
And it was 2 hours.
You don't see a lot in horror movies these days.
It didn't feel long.
But so, you do a little bit of acting, right? I don't know if they cover that when because I saw you were in. We've interviewed Jesus Cruz, and you're in one of his skits, or were you in multiple, or just one?
I was in one that he filmed that we did in San Jose, and then
at a restaurant, right?
Yeah, and I just played. I didn't. My lines were cut, so I didn't even have a speaking role. But it was just more of a presence. But it was fine. No, I've done some. I'm in a movie actually. It's on Amazon Prime. It's it's all right. It's not the best movie or by any means, but it's called Live or Die in La Honda, and I like it for what it was. My scenes are good. I enjoyed my scenes. But I like my friend Eric Summers' review of it. He goes a lot of shooting, a lot of drinking, little too much talking, which I feel is a fair assessment. But you can find that it's on Amazon Prime, and I think you can also watch it streaming on other things. And then I just uploaded on my channel actually my short film I made in 2004 called Day versus the Chairs, which is like a fun little slapstick 4-minute film that I was very proud of, and I gave it as a gift to my family that year, and it was kind of a popular gift, and I never uploaded it to YouTube because I didn't want to cheapen it, and then I waited until 2020 to then cheapen the fuck out of it. So there you go.
Right on, man. Hey, dude, again, thank you again for coming on, man.
Thank you for having me, man.
I've enjoyed. Yeah, dude, I appreciate you coming on, and thank you for giving us the time, and I hope all the listeners check you out, man, because that's the goal with this podcast. Get all my talented buddies and not just my buddies, but just talented people in general from the area, to get them some views from whatever I can bring, and just have a great conversation.
Totally, and that's what I was going to say. If I didn't bore them to tears, feel free. Keep checking me out, man. There's plenty more where that came from. So.
Right on, man. I hope to be performing again with you soon, brother.
Same here, man. Thank you very much, you guys.
Yeah. All right.
Glad to have you,
man.
Have a great night.
Yeah.
All right. This is the Voice Party, everybody. We are out.